You might not like her, but she has to be regarded as one of the most famous influencers of all time. Her name is Kim Kardashian. It's crazy, but one of the sacrifices that you make when you're as famous, and to be honest, as successful as she, is that you have a newly placed target put on your back. You would think that being this famous you would have a serious security detail, but no fortress is impenetrable. Kim Kardashian's robbery story is a very anxiety-inducing and serious one, and it's set back in the early hours of Monday the 3rd of October 2016 in Paris. The city of light, the city of love, and the city in which Kim Kardashian would be met by a number of men who would tie up, gag, and rob the then 35-year-old of millions of dollars. Let's take things back to September 28th, when Kim lands in Paris with her assistant and her bodyguard. It should be clear that when you're as famous as Kim Kardashian is, you're always going to have the paparazzi on you. And this is going to let any potential criminals know exactly where you are and what you're doing. According to a Vanity Fair article I found on the incident, they claim Parisian paparazzi to be some of the fiercest in the world. And they actually followed Kim all the way from the airport to her place of stay at Hotel de Portal. This is a place that's been home to many celebrities' stays over the years. The Hotel de Portal say that if you want to stay there, you have to be either rich or famous or both, or be referred by someone who is. But if you're none of the above, you could just be an opportune burglar, because apparently the Hotel de Portal has some serious security problems. It had limited CCTV, mild security, and an entrance code that had not been changed in 6 years, making it a prime target for these criminals. A couple of days later, after a busy day in Paris for Kim, she was driven home at about 1 AM. This time without the usual photography tailgate that had been following her around all week. The paparazzi thought that the most memorable parts of the woman's day were over. But little did they know, they had only just begun. Now, one common theme throughout this video is that essentially all of these influencers have been specifically targeted. The robbers will always know who they are, where they are, and what they want. And they know this because the victims will usually post a picture on social media of them with a very expensive item worth stealing to these criminals. In the case of Kim, this might have just been a 20-carat diamond ring that she had on her finger, worth an estimated $4 million. This post on Instagram was solely captioned with 3 diamond emojis. So we have a diamond ring worth an estimated $4 million on the finger of a woman whose live location is known about essentially 24 hours of the day, staying at a hotel with notoriously low security. This was the perfect storm for what was about to happen next. It's thought that the thieves arrived on bicycle, as to avoid traffic, camera, and prying eyes. And according to locals, if you ride a bicycle in Paris, you know the streets well. It was 18 minutes past 2 in the morning, when a camera showed 3 men riding towards the hotel on bikes. Over time, they were joined by another 2 and then another 1 anonymous figures. From there, the details start to dry up, as we only have accounts from people involved to go off of. And of course, with this being such a high-stress scenario, things can be misremembered very easily. Kim Kardashian said on the events, "I heard a noise at the door, like footsteps, and I shouted asking, 'Who's there?' No one answered. I called my bodyguard at 2:56 AM. Through the door, I saw 2 people arrive, plus the nightman who was tied up." She continued, explaining that the 2 men had police paraphernalia on, and 1 individual wore ski goggles. "They grabbed me and took me into the hallway. I was wearing a bathrobe naked underneath. Then we went into the room again and they pushed me on the bed." It was then that they both bound and gagged the damsel, robbing her of an estimated $10 million, including the ring, and made their escape. Kim mentioned that the way in which they tied her up made her suspect that these men were not professionals, but the way in which they bound her would actually lead to them being tied to the crime, as police found DNA of the supposed ringleader on the adhesive tape they used to restrain her. A total of 12 people, aged from their 20s to 70s, were later set to stand trial with ties to the horrific event on that fateful evening, but not all of them were remorseful for their actions. Younis Abbas, a 67-year-old, said that though this robbery must have traumatized Kardashian, it would teach her to be less showy with her wealth. He said, "Since she was throwing money away, I was there to collect it, and that was that. Guilty? No, I don't care." The orchestrator of this crime, Omar H. Kadesh, allegedly wrote an apology letter, but whether this was just to try and get a lighter sentence is debatable. Kim has said that she's lived her life much differently since this experience, and she now cares much less for material possessions. It's a wild story for sure, but Kim Kardashian's case is just the first of many that we're going to cover today. And I say we because we're joined today by a good friend of mine, Knight, who's going to help me talk about just a few of the most fascinating stories of YouTubers and influencers who got robbed. So we're just going to bounce things between us to tell you guys these shocking and cautionary tales. Let's do it.
Pewdiepie. Who is the most known YouTuber of all time? If you said Mr. Beast, you're not wrong, but the OG that was the first to hit 100 million subscribers was Pewdiepie. For those who don't know, Pewdiepie is one of the most influential YouTubers of all time. He mainly now reacts to memes that people make on the internet, streams video games from his bedroom, and treats us with a vlog every once in a while. Back in 2019, he was the first person to hit 100 million subscribers, and that was the same year that his house in Japan got robbed. The first to reveal this news to us was his spouse, Marzia. She almost immediately posted an Instagram story saying 90% of her valuables, jewelry, luxury, and special items she had been collecting over the years were stolen. She did note the fact that the post was materialistic, but she was shocked because it was all gone, just like that. PewDiePie mentioned this at the very beginning of one of his videos, saying that in the same week, his house in England got flooded and his house in Japan got robbed. That sounds like the worst week ever. That's basically all we knew until PewDiePie decided to open up about it even further. Everything the thieves stole belonged to his girlfriend. He only had two things worthy in that house: his camera and his computer. Those thieves definitely knew what not to mess with, or maybe they didn't know that on that computer there's a YouTube channel worth much more than any of the jewelry or valuable items in that house. Maybe they're the dumb ones. I mean, they're stealing stuff. Obviously, that's dumb. Don't steal stuff. But how is it possible that the thieves decided to only steal his girlfriend's belongings? He said that he had recently donated many of his items that lacked personal, sentimental value, or that they were just useless and collected dust. Even if some of his stuff was stolen, he said how reading philosophical works helped him to stop caring so much about material things, except those that have sentimental value, of course. Many of you don't know, but Felix is a big fan of philosophy. He's created many videos on this topic, and even once cited Aristotle before deleting his Twitter account because he hated it. His love for philosophy has helped him get through the situation without any major consequences. Unfortunately, we can't say the same for his spouse, but I'm sure PewDiePie bought her something nice to put a smile on her face again.
As for our next story, we need to jump back to August of 2018, because this was the time when the Ace family came back from Disneyland to find out that they too had been robbed. If you've seen many of my videos, you would know that I've levied a lot of criticism against the Ace family in particular, but also other family channels, but at the end of the day, no one deserves to get robbed. With the mother of the family, Catherine Pays, 8 months pregnant at the time. But one of the reasons I thought this would be an interesting story to bring up here is that when the family shared the disturbing news to the internet, a high portion of people thought they were faking. This kind of thing doesn't seem out of the realms of possibility for what Austin McBroom would do to try and generate some buzz for his family's channel. And since he made a video on the subject right after it happened, this raised suspicions. In this video, fans noticed that the police acted somewhat strange. To add further suspicion, while whoever burglarized the place did take a number of Catherine's handbags, for the most part, the more expensive of the family's belongings were left untouched. We're talking designer clothes and shoes, a wallet, and a tablet, just to name a few of these items. It's peculiar that a burglar would not take any of these. So after the internet somewhat accused them of faking this crime, Catherine would take to Twitter, calling the accusations of them faking this situation, quote, ridiculous. But this didn't stop a YouTube drama Instagram account from posting this receipt of what appears to be paid actors and props being sold to Austin McBroom. Though I would take this with a grain of salt, because whilst this might seem like damning evidence, it is indeed unverified. Keemstar will come out on his own Twitter, however, and post a picture of the police report to the world, which does seem like slightly more credible evidence that no, the Ace family did not self-report. There's a very good chance that when they were away on holiday, probably posting about it on social media, someone who knew where their house was actually did rob them. This would be backed up by the fact that according to a source that I found, it was reported that a house roughly half a mile away was also robbed on the same day, potentially suggesting that this robber might have been on a bit of a spree, even though it could be that these are two unrelated incidents. And with their robbing video being one of their most viewed ever, they would have the means and the motive of faking this. Nonetheless, all these years later, and I don't think that anything substantial has come out about whether this thief has been caught. I don't think there were many big breakthroughs in this case, so I can't be one to confirm or deny if this burglary happened in the way that the Ace family said it did. Still, it's very curious to say the least.
Florence Mirsky. Sherman Oaks, a neighborhood in Los Angeles that has a reputation for being part of the wealthy area of the Valley, is also a neighborhood where Florence Mirsky's multi-million-dollar mansion is located. If you haven't already, go get some popcorn because this one is something out of a movie. Have you ever seen or maybe tried that cannabis-shaped chocolate called Cocoa Nugs? Florence Mirsky is a co-founder of Cocoa Nugs and an influencer that's been in a relationship with Scott Storch for 3 years. Scott Storch being a Grammy-winning record producer. Armed robbers decided his expensive mansion is a must-do. At the time of the robbery, 2 women were house-sitting for Florence. The housekeeper and her friends were peacefully sleeping when the light being turned on inside the mansion woke them up. They didn't know what was going on, but the panic kicked in when they realized they were not alone in the room. 3 robbers were holding them at gunpoint. Tears of fear started running down their cheeks while one of the robbers improvised and handcuffed them using thick zip ties. Before they started raiding the mansion and looting for some type of treasure, they took phones from the housekeepers who were absolutely terrified. The police said one of the robbers had been armed with a pistol and 2 others with a rifle. Doesn't sound like a random attack to me. Imagine falling asleep after a long day, craving some good rest, and then waking up with 3 guns pointed at your face. After the robbers took what they came for, they fled the scene in an unknown direction in a blue sedan. At the time of the robbery, Mirsky was in New York, but the 2 hostages figured out they could use a Ring doorbell camera to alert her. As soon as she realized what was going on, she called the police at about 3 a.m. from New York, adding she saw an image of a tied person screaming for help. There were no signs of forced entry, so investigators are assuming robbers made their way in by picking a door lock. There is a theory that this may have been someone from the inside, since Mirsky said robbers already knew where to look. She stated that robbers went straight to her closet where she kept her safe. She was suspicious because of this, so she offered a $100,000 reward for those who could capture the suspect. The stress she went through had put fear in her bones and affected her mental health. The safety of her 2.5-year-old kid was the only thing on her mind, so she decided she was not going to be going back to her $5 million mansion. Fortunately, no one was harmed in this robbery. That's the most important thing.
As for this next case, I want to take the time to slow things down and have a serious conversation. If you've watched my videos for a while, you'll know that I'm really not a big fan of flashy things or superficiality or vanity. And it's a reason why I'm interested in this kind of thing. It's a reason why I'm making this type of video. But after hearing Yianni Charalambous' story, I knew there was so much more to this kind of thing that I hadn't really considered before. This is the story of how he was bound, beaten, and robbed in his own home. So Yianni, as he more commonly goes by, in case you don't know him, owned a business that customized luxury cars for celebrities. He noted Bakary Sagna, Simon Cowell, and Harry Styles as some of his customers, as well as the Sidemen members Rota Shaw and KSI. It was actually Yianni that was the guy that customized KSI's iconic purple Lambo. But in his video describing the events of his robbery, Yianni made a point that kind of hit home to me. That yeah, he liked to splash his cash on luxury items, he liked to flex and show off, but at the end of the day, he worked for it. So should he not be able to spend his money on luxury items and flashy stuff if he so pleases? And to be honest, even though I still don't like it, I reconsidered my stance after I heard his point. But after what happened to him, I'm sure that Yianni could also understand my position a little bit more. Because in his video, he would describe the events leading up to his robbery and even said it himself. Back in 2016, he went to Harrods to buy a Richard Milles watch with his friend. His friend, upon learning his intention to buy this watch, decided to record a video of him purchasing it, with Yianni putting up a picture of his watch and receipt on social media. For those of you who don't know, Richard Milles watches are incredibly expensive, and the one that Yianni bought was £94,000. He spent the best part of $100,000 on a damn watch. He's in the big leagues, he's making it big, he's cringing in the modern modern day though, because let's be fair, this way of acting is just a bit cringe. Flash forward to July 2016 and it's just after his 40th birthday. He then goes to a club in London. And just a little thing about London before we carry on with this, in the last couple of years especially, there has been a huge surge in armed robbery in the city. London is the beating heart of the UK, it's one of the most historical cities in the world, but it has a crime problem. If you're caught in the wrong side of the city, walking the streets with something flashy, and a moped with two guys pulls up next to you, good luck. Yianni posts his night out on his story, and because he doesn't drink, drives back from the club and goes to sleep. After falling asleep, he's suddenly awoken to being hit on the head with a blunt object that he thought was a screwdriver. A total of 3 men had entered his room and were shouting at him to start handing over his possessions. They take his watches, his earrings, and then one of the men say, "Yianni, where's your Richard Milles?" And this changes everything for the victim because he now knows that this is a targeted attack. He gets whacked around the head with a baseball bat after telling them that his watch is back at Harrods being repaired for a scratch. And afterwards, the robbers tape up his hands and move around the house, looking for more valuables. And they eventually find a safe, taking even more watches and about £10,000 cash. The thieves then left and the police were contacted, but nobody has ever been caught. The very same thieves would break into his house once again a short while after, but this time Yianni wasn't home and his safe was emptied. Just like Kim Kardashian, Yianni has since said that this incident has caused him to rethink his attitude towards material possessions and to not flex his wealth so much on the internet.
Ali A. Ali A is a British YouTuber who is one of the luckiest on this list of unlucky influencers that got robbed. Ali A is one of the most popular Fortnite content creators that has amassed over 3 billion views. Lately, he posts reaction videos and uploads new videos regularly every few days. He lives in London, where car thefts are at an all-time high. If you plan on visiting London with your car, make sure to choose where you park it very carefully. Even though Ali A chose where he would park his then new Audi A1 very carefully, his car still got broken into. In December of 2015, he uploaded a video called "I Got Robbed," explaining to us how he went to London for a birthday party where he spent 2 days while also recording a vlog for his YouTube channel. He parked his car in a pretty decent, non-shady area. He even parked it back, so that way the trunk couldn't be opened. This is where he made a huge mistake though, by forgetting to lock his vehicle. Unfortunately, the auto-locking feature on his car just didn't work. When he came back to get his car, he didn't notice anything unusual. That's until he got back home, opened the trunk, and realized his bags were missing. Those bags contained high-end recording gear, and what makes this even worse is that he had 2 days worth of content on that camera. As a fellow content creator, I already lose my mind when I forget to flick on my mic when I'm recording something. I couldn't imagine the pain of losing 2 days worth of footage in just a swoop. Ugh, it sounds painful. It sounds so painful. He assumed that a person saw him forget to lock the car after he parked it, waited until he was gone, and since the thief couldn't open the trunk, he probably got in the car and stole everything that he could reach in his trunk. Additionally, the thief didn't even know if there was anything of value in the car because of the tinted glass. He just went for it and relied on his luck. He ended up stealing more than £1,000 worth of equipment. This is all the information we have since our only source was his video. If you've ever had something stolen from you, you know it's not the greatest feeling in the world. It's even worse if you can't replace the stolen things just by buying a new one, let's say because it was like a gift. Later, he went out and bought a brand new camera, but he was visibly sad because he had lost all the great content that he recorded. I feel for you, man. There really is nothing worse than losing the content that you worked so hard on.
As for our next story, this is the tale of Troy Williams, also known as Candy. He's a businessman and influencer, being quite good at both, having over 165,000 followers on Instagram, and evidently being good enough at business so that he can afford a $130,000 luxury Mercedes. However, in July 2021, a group of teenagers decided to ransack his car, and they got much more than they bargained for. The turquoise Mercedes was parked in the driveway of Candy's house when the teens attacked, and roughly 20 to 30 minutes after the crime took place, the influencer was made aware of it. Now here's the thing about teenagers, they're a wild bunch, but they can often be way too cocky for their own good. I know I was. But these guys took it much further than most because the teens that did this filmed themselves doing it and actually tagged Candy in the video. This was a targeted attack. They knew exactly what they were doing and who they were doing it to. But what's really out of line is that because these guys followed Candy on Instagram, they would very likely know that his wife was pregnant at the time. And I'm not just talking 1 or 2 months pregnant, she was 8 months, about to burst pregnant. Candy and his wife were moving some stuff from their Mercedes when they left the car door open and the thieves decided to strike. These low-life scum really committed a crime against a pregnant woman, and Candy decided to go on the damn warpath. He offered a cash reward to any of his followers that might know what happened to give him the information surrounding the perpetrators and the return of his stolen items. According to Candy, his wallet was stolen as well as a few personal items, with these being worth a few thousand Australian dollars. Candy took a lot of pictures and videos and gave updates about the situation, and in this clip, he says that within 1 hour, his followers were able to track down these guys and caught them dead to absolute rights. He got their full names, partners' addresses, parents' addresses, he got absolutely everything. He took a visit to their parents' houses because Candy claims that the police just tend to give these kids a slap on their wrist and then just send them on their way with no consequences. Which, fair play to him, because I can't imagine anything more shameful than someone you've just robbed walk into your house and tell your parents that you're a thieving piece of shit. One parent in particular, he said, was crying and didn't know what to do with her son. Candy went on to say that literally a week before the Mercedes attack, the same kids had also stolen a Ferrari, went through the courts, and were again just allowed to get back out with no consequences. He pled with these teens to change their ways because eventually they will come into contact with someone who might defend their property or seriously push charges. It's only a matter of time. But nonetheless, Candy was eventually able to get his family's stuff back, so this story does have more of a happy ending. And if I ever get robbed, I'd love my Instagram followers to be able to help me out, so if you're not following me there yet, definitely do. There's a link in the description. Go follow me on Instagram and Twitter. And if you're down there, give this video a like and subscribe if you haven't already, and also go subscribe to Knight because he makes amazing content. Thank you very much for helping me out on this video. Apart from that, thank you for watching and I'll see you later.